Welcome to All in the Words, the podcast for writers and storymakers in all their forms. Each fortnight we explore a different corner of the writing world, from stage to screen, audio to novels, lyrics to scripts. With original pieces, creative conversations and toolkits for your process. Lee here, and in this episode we talk to the awesome talent that is singer, songwriter, composer and producer Martha Phillips. All to come in this episode of All in the Words. Hey, welcome to All in the Words. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Martha Phillips, who is an accomplished singer, songwriter, composer and producer. And with this podcast being about the words, I thought it would be interesting to have a conversation with her about the process of songwriting. So hi, Martha.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me here today.
Thanks for having me.
And how's things in your world?
How's things in my world? Busy, but good. I'm intrigued to see where this conversation goes. I feel like I spend a lot of my time on a computer focusing on sounds, and I sometimes forget about the lyrics, so this is exciting.
Well, I'm intrigued to see where we go with it as well. I thought it would be really useful, actually, just in terms of getting a bit of backstory for you, talking about your back catalogue and the variety of the work that you've done. So can you give us a bit of backstory to where you came from and how you got to where you are today?
Well, I've been writing songs for as long as I can remember. And at first, for most of my life, it's been me writing songs about what's going on in my head and trying to explain things as like a way of communication. So I started as a singer-songwriter. I went into a band, then I got a little bit more angry and it turned into a rock band. And post-band, I've been working on so many different projects, so including the Guiseley Theatre Christmas shows, writing songs for them, short film composition, sync and licensing briefs, and co-writing for other artists. So a lot of fingers in lots of different pies kind of thing. But it's been a really fun and unexpected journey. Yeah.
Cool. So you mentioned bands. So let's go back to the beginning. When did you first start writing? What was the first song that you wrote?
For the band?
Well, just generally.
Or in general.
What inspired you in the first instance?
The very first song I wrote was a rip-off of the Girls Aloud cover of Jump.
Okay, yeah.
Which I think had come out as like promo for, what was that Christmas film? Was it Love Actually? Now, obviously, I didn't see this when it came out because I was like 7 or 8. But the Girls Aloud song, Jump, was on Pop Princesses, which was my favourite CD as an 8-year-old. And I basically ripped that song off, but I wrote new lyrics to it. So yeah, it must have been about 7 or 8, but I remember being absolutely obsessed with it. And I don't know where that came from or why I was possessed to do such a thing, but I very vividly remember writing that. And then I think the next one was like a McFly rip-off. Basically, I started ripping off artists when I was about 8 years old. And then by the time I was 12 or 13, I was writing actual real lyrics, stuff that was coming out of my head.
So just interestingly, actually, because you're a composer as well. So when you say that you started writing songs at that early age, did you have the melody, the tune in your head as well at the time, or?
Well, I had the melody and the tune, but it was the Girls Aloud melody.
Right.
So I wasn't writing to instrumentation or anything like that. I wasn't like Mozart, baby genius or anything, but the lyrics and the melody were very much just amalgamations of my favourite songs at the time. And then when I was 12 or 13, I think, Santa got me a guitar, which I just refused to put down. And I think that's probably when I started writing my own songs with my own melodies and my own lyrics. But yeah, for the first few years, I basically was a Girls Aloud / McFly tribute band.
So you say you started writing lyrics for your own melodies and what have you. In terms of, I mean, obviously I've listened to your back catalogue extensively over the years. And it boggles my mind where these lyrics come from. Can you tell? I mean, I'm kind of jumping about a bit all over the place here in what we're going to be discussing, but I'll be interested to know what your process was in terms of writing those songs.
Early on, and I think for the majority of my artistic, in inverted commas, career, it was basically like I was writing my diary, and it was a very like necessary cathartic thing for me to do to like process what was going on around me. And later in life, like in the past couple of years, I found out I'm neurodivergent, and so a lot of that makes sense to me now because I really struggle with communication and saying how I feel and understanding like how to communicate acceptably with other people. I feel like there's a lot of cues that I miss. So in hindsight, I can see that songwriting was me trying to make sense of the world at that age when I just didn't have the tools to do so. So lyrically, a lot of the things I was talking about were things that were going on in my head that I didn't feel I could share in any other way. And I think as I grew older and I was more learning more about the world and more about myself, I had a lot more ammo to work with. I'm just kind of like processing my place in the world. I think the only way that I felt able to do that was through songwriting. And so, in terms of like actually coming up with the lyrics, sometimes it's just stuff that comes to me in my sleep or in the shower. Like I'm not thinking about it. Once I start writing that line, my hand kind of runs away without my brain thinking about it, which is really interesting and like it's such an incredible experience. And I'm sure you probably get the same with script writing. Like it just starts coming out without you doing anything. Does that make sense? Can you relate?
That makes a lot of sense, and I can relate to that because often I'll just sit down with the keyboard and a blank page, and it is the process, isn't it? It's like you have an idea of what the story that you want to tell, and it could just be like a line, and you write that down, and then suddenly you're running conversations in your head, and you know
Yeah.
the process that you go through is overwriting, and then the skill then is to go back and do all the editing and what have you. I imagine that process is the same for songwriting, although you do have some constraints because you've got to make it fit within the structure of a song.
Yeah, that's true. That was actually, I think, one of the reasons our music, like I'm really proud of the songs that I wrote, especially in the band. Um, but I think that was one of the reasons that we weren't as accessible as like pop music was because I didn't really focus in on that. Like you were saying about going back and editing things. Now when I'm writing songs for other artists or writing songs to brief, I'm a lot more analytical and I'll write things down and I'll change them and I'll change them. But with the band and with anything like for my own artistic output, I didn't really refine. Occasionally there were times when I'd go back and change a word or two, but I would just like write and see what comes out because it was such a like necessary cathartic experience and like it felt like something I needed to do. I was kind of reluctant to go back and shape that into an accessible pop song, if that makes sense.
That does make sense, but also it's really really interesting because when I listened to the lyrics that you have written, it astonishes me how you can put so much meaning into one simple like sentence or a phrase, whatever it is that you call it in songwriting. One line can have so much in it to unpack, and the fact that you have done that intuitively rather than sat there and analysed and gone back and reworded. I mean, I think that's really uh, important to recognise the skill that you have. That it's an intuitive thing. It's not necessarily a premeditated thing or whatever.
Yeah, that's interesting that you said that actually. Because sometimes I listen to my own stuff, my artistic stuff, and I think that's too convoluted. No one's going to relate to that. So that yeah, that's interesting that you said that. But I think I spent probably just too much time in my head over my teenage years when I was writing those songs. So you know, you win some, you lose some.
But interestingly, then you're not a teenager now, so all that angst that you channeled into your music writing then, as we grow and as we evolve, we still have different experiences, which then inform the writing that we do. But I'm interested to know how your process has changed over the years, and particularly because I know that you've done a lot of collaborations, and you're actually doing a lot of writing to brief through the writing camps that you do, and the what was the term that you used? Is it sync?
Yeah, sync and production music.
Right, can you explain to me what that is?
So production music, I have done a few albums for a company called BMG, which is a publishing company, and BMG and publishing companies in general, in turn, have relationships with like TV networks, for example. So I'll give you a specific example. I've had a brief from them that is they want music that would sound good behind a game show, like a reality TV kind of game show, like Traitors or Love Island. And so they'll have a really specific brief and almost topic that they would want the song to be about. And so I basically just write to that, like it feels like a puzzle that you kind of have to solve through the songwriting, and they in turn will then use that music and send it to say ITV, for example. So that is a completely different way of writing a song. It's a lot more targeted.
So with that in mind, okay, like you talked about, your early process was about you using your music as a way of expressing yourself, getting rid of all the angst that you were feeling. Now you're writing to very specific briefs. How does that compare? Do you find it easy? What's the process that you go through? Because as much as your life is informing what you write, you're not necessarily expressing your personal journey. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes I do draw on personal experience, but I think for songs where I have a brief, I do kind of find it easier. It's more like colouring within the lines or colouring by numbers. There's examples of what the song kind of should sound like or what lane it should sit in. There's less possibilities of how the song could end, I suppose. I mean, obviously you're still writing completely original material. These songs didn't exist beforehand. But songwriting for yourself, there's no rules at all, which is very liberating and important and is integral to me as an artist to continue doing things like that. But writing to brief is, I don't know, it's fun. It's fun and it's stuff I would never have done otherwise. I think once I'd started doing them, I realised that music can actually be a fun and positive experience. Whereas previously I was like, oh, I'm feeling so low today, I'm going to have to write a song about it. Let's write the darkest thing you could possibly write. Whereas I get a brief through that's like, fun glittery pop for a summer party. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I have to put a different hat on. And it is like stepping into character, and I really enjoy that.
I know from listening to it's on the streaming platforms, Incantation Presents, and there's there's a lot of music on there that I'm aware that the brief that you were given, and the reference tracks that you had were very much kind of like from the 80s and the 90s. The reason I'm saying this is, I mean, I think it's some of my favorite stuff that you've written, and I would encourage everyone to go and listen to it, because if you're a fan of Madonna, if you're a fan of ABBA, if you're a fan of what were the other reference tracks that you had for that?
I think the reference tracks I had were Miley Cyrus and Kim Petras, a more 80s vibe of the songs that they'd released.
Justin Timberlake was another one.
That was so fun to write. And that was my first introduction to this side of the world as well. And it was like glittery, summery pop, queer pop. And that's the first thing I'd done out of the band, again, which had been this angsty, like, self-indulgent, creative mess. It's still stuff I'm really proud of, but this was the opposite end of the spectrum. And it was just so fun to be silly and girly and poppy and something that I'd just never done before. And I actually think it was really good for me as a songwriter to, like, just jump completely to the other end of the spectrum.
Well, I know from my listening to it, it transported me back to a certain period of my life. So, yeah.
You were the target audience.
It did the job.
I'm so glad.
Again, that was a solo venture in terms of, like, it was just you wrote it, you composed it, you produced it, did the whole package there.
Yeah.
You've started working a lot now on collaborations. How does that compare?
How does that compare? Again, it's a completely different hat to wear, because every single artist has a different taste and a different idea of what they want their music to sound like. So lyrically, I don't know where this comes from, but I imagine it's the same for you and the same with all different kind of writers. But there's some words that I would just never use because they make me cringe a little bit. Whereas to other artists, that word might have a completely different meaning and it might be really special to them. So it's weird trying to bring your own experience and expertise and creativity to a project, bearing in mind that it's not for you and it's not for your taste in music either. So I've done all sorts, like kind of acoustic pop or a bit more dancey. I've done a bit of drum and bass. I've done pop rock, and all of them have their own rules that you kind of have to rely on the other people in the session to lead with. But everyone's coming with their own experience and their own ideas, and that's what makes something interesting and creative and stands out in that genre. So lyrically, it's a bit of a fine line, trying to figure out what's going to work and what isn't. But it's a really wonderful experience to create with people, especially like people you've never met. You can go into a session and by the end of it, you're best friends. And I feel like it's a really special moment. I don't really know how to describe it, but like these songs don't exist 3 or 4 hours earlier. And suddenly you've just created something that is really special to someone else. It's a nice communal experience. And I think writing for myself previously, that was a really isolating experience. Whereas this is just fun and it's like creating with other people. Yeah.
But you mentioned there about different genres, writing in all these different genres. Now you'll have your own personal taste, your own personal preference in the kind of music that you listen to, that you want to enjoy. So when you're given a brief or you're working with an artist who is in a completely different genre to what you're used to working with, comfortable with, that you would write in, how easy is it to be able to kind of approach that with an objective point of view, for want of a better word?
I used to really struggle with it, but I think I'm getting the hang of it now. I was in a drum and bass camp a couple of weeks ago, and there were times when I had absolutely no idea what anyone was talking about. These genres have such intense communities as well. It's the communities and cultures that I'm not familiar with, but it's so incredible to learn about that and see like the music industry, which I kind of came through on a more alternative scene. That was my whole understanding of the music industry, that and like what you see in the charts, pop music. But I think through writing with other people, it's such an incredible patchwork, the music industry in England. And I think from working in the alternative scene, that's not very common in writing rooms at the moment. So it actually gives me the ability to come from a completely different angle and throw stuff out there that no one else would have thought of. So I think it kind of works in my favour a lot of the time. Sometimes I do just sit there and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. But I think everyone gets that.
Do you find that challenge interesting or daunting?
I definitely used to find it daunting. Now I find it really interesting. And I can appreciate everyone coming from different angles. I used to walk into sessions and take it really personally if I didn't understand something, or if so for example, I was on a camp at the beginning of this year, and I was working with one of the most incredible guitarists I've ever met and one of the most incredible blues singers and lyricists I'd ever met. And a year before, if I'd have walked into that session, I would have felt so intimidated and like, these are two people in their prime and I don't deserve to be here. Like, I don't know what's going on. My ideas aren't good enough. Whereas I think just through doing it so much and being completely out of my comfort zone, probably 80% of the time, I feel like I've learned a lot and I can now walk in there and it's actually quite relaxing. I'm like, oh, this is one of the best guitarists I've ever met. Thank God he's in this room because I'm not the best guitarist. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like playing top trumps, but we're all on the same team. Do you know what I mean?
And how many points you get for being an amazing producer, and how many points they get for having great guitar skills and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and like, what an incredible thing we can do now that we're all working together on the same team. Yeah. I think that's the thing about co-writing versus writing for yourself, is there's so much more experience and talent to draw from, which used to be scary and intimidating, but is now awesome to me.
So this kind of is something that we touched on earlier on. You said that you'd written for the Christmas shows that Coswallop does at Guys in Theatre.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've talked to you about how you approach things which maybe aren't your natural go-to style or whatever. In terms of writing these show tunes, what's that process? How do you feel about that?
I used to really struggle with it. I've been working with you guys and with Jacob and Lucy and the whole team at Codswallop for 7, 8 years. It's been a long time, and I was very much at the start of my career in understanding how to write for other people. I think that was probably the first time I'd written something that wasn't for the band, was for a Codswallop Christmas show. And it took me a while to understand how to do that. Especially each Christmas show has a completely different theme and a different sonic landscape, I suppose. Approaching those shows, it's really helpful to have a reference playlist, which Jacob and Lucy compile at the beginning of the process, and to read the script, to understand the motives of the characters and understand the kind of, I guess, emotional depth that they're dealing with. It's hard writing lyrics in that setting because you're trying to not repeat everything that's been said in the script already. That would just be boring. You're trying to like pull out the emotional nuances that haven't been said already. I do find that quite difficult, and every time I go to write them, I feel really daunted and like I'm not going to be able to do this. Every single show that they've done, I've thought, I've no idea how I'm going to be able to do this. But I think as soon as, for me personally, as soon as I start writing something down, it's that thing where the pen runs away from you without realising. And I specifically do write with a pen and paper because my hand seems to take it away from me.
Interesting.
I've tried typing it out, but it feels more sterile. I don't know what the science is behind that.
It's really interesting that you say that because when I've been reading around musical theatre, because I've got ideas that I want to write myself, it's the point of whether the play would exist if you lifted those songs out and make sense, or whether they are integral to the storytelling. And I think that is, as you've outlined there, the test of how successful a musical is, or how a musical is defined. There's a lot of these kind of like jukebox musicals, and it's really interesting because those are pre-existing songs which are being slotted into a story. How do you make those lyrics fit without going through that process that you've outlined there in terms of like moving the story on without repeating what's been said? That's just stuff that's going through my head at the moment, the stuff I'm thinking about in terms of like the things I want to write in the future.
So to you, would you say the musical would be better if you could take the music out and it would still tell the whole story? Or are you saying the music is integral?
I grew up watching musicals on the telly. It was like the Saturday matinee on a Saturday afternoon on BBC Two when there were only 4 stations.
Yeah.
And it was the old classics like Oklahoma and Singing in the Rain and Seven Brides for Seven Brothers and all that, and Sound of Music. And they were written that the songs were integral to the storytelling. And that, I think, to my mind, is the authenticity of a musical. And in anything I write, whether it's with pre-existing songs or whether it's with newly commissioned material, I would hope that they would serve that purpose so that the play does not exist without the music. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. I was just trying to think then in context to the Christmas shows that we've done, whether that would be the case. And the last one that we did was The Bauble Bandit. And my personal favourite piece of music for that was Patricia's Confession. And that, I guess, is an integral storytelling piece.
So for context for our listeners, The Bauble Bandit is a Christmas play where the Christmas tree in the town square is taken away and
stolen
stolen
in the dark of night.
And the play centres around who did it. And then we find out, I don't want to give too much away.
Well, I just gave it away with the title of the song, didn't I?
But there's a beautiful song in it where one of the characters, you hear her backstory basically, which that hasn't been told in the play at any other point. So if you didn't have that song in the play, then you wouldn't have any revelation.
No, that is true. And also just thinking about that song now, I made that point earlier about that. This is a classic writing to brief. There was an objective of what the song was supposed to do and like what it was supposed to give away. as I said earlier, about drawing from personal experience to make things more authentic and emotional. Whilst that song was about an old lady's life, and I'm not yet an old lady, I took, as you know, details from our family Christmas and kind of used that to make it sound more authentic. And I think that was the kind of thing where the pen runs away from you. Is I think that's where it happens, is where you're drawing from personal experience and personal emotions and trying to sit yourself in someone else's shoes and like, how would you feel if that was something you were going through? What would you talk about in that moment? So it was really specific things down to like crackers made out of toilet paper rolls, which is something we used to do as kids. So I think that's why that's one of my favorite songs as well from that musical, is because it is, whilst it is about someone else and it is about someone else's life and experiences, and it's not something I can relate to, there's moments where I definitely can relate to it, if that makes sense.
What about incidental music? Do you enjoy doing that when you don't have to think about the lyrics?
That's interesting. Yes, I do. I really do. When I was younger, I was a lyric person, and lyrics were integral to me, and I thought that was the whole reason of a song. And there's no right or wrong to this at all, but that's just the way that my brain was wired. As I get older and I fall more into the production side of music, I am more focused on the emotion I can create through sounds and through the expression of a chord. Even just like the amount of emotion you can pull out from the resonant frequency of a synth, for example. These are like really tiny details, and I find that really fascinating. So yes, I really do. I don't really know the science behind it. I know that there is a science behind it, and there is the whole world of music theory could really explicitly explain why you feel the way that you do. But I've never really been a music theory person, to my detriment. But for writing music, for example, for the Christmas shows, where they want to convey a spooky theme, it's interesting how much you can convey just by adding like an augmented seventh into the soundscape, if that makes sense. Like I do not know music theory well enough to go into this whole world of explaining it, but it is something that you feel, and through the feeling of it, that's actually led me into a bit more understanding of music theory. Like, why do I feel this way, and how do I make an audience feel this way? What exactly is it that I'm playing? The software that I use, which is called Logic, it's got a very nice feature where I can play a chord and it tells me what chord I'm playing rather than the other way around. Quite often I'm like, oh yeah, of course it's an augmented seventh with an add 9 or whatever. Of course it is. Now, through doing that more, I do know kind of roughly what I should be playing to express a certain emotion, but it was very much learning as I go to begin with.
I suppose the comparison is the advice that writers are always given is to show, not tell. So that's where the incidental music comes in, because you're showing or conveying an emotion rather than actually explicitly stating what it is through the lyric.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I really love that kind of thing where that is the show, not tell. That's so interesting that you said that, because it's like, how can you manipulate an audience subtly? That's why I absolutely love listening to TV and film scores. It's because you can tell what's going on just through listening to the music. And if you took the music away, I find it interesting. You can kind of tell what's a good show and what isn't a good show. By like, if you took the music away, would you still be feeling emotional in this scene? I was just, sorry, this is kind of going off on a tangent, but I've just been working on a short film that's kind of like a thriller. And one of the reference points was Severance, which is one of my favourite shows. I'm a little bit obsessed with that show. And it's so interesting. I've never worked on this kind of media before. I've never worked in this genre or this kind of spooky feel, but also a bit slasher, a bit thriller. And so I've never seen like a murder scene, for example, without the music, and how it kind of feels a little bit silly, you know? Because these people are just playing pretend, but they're covered in blood. You know what I mean? I haven't really seen that before. And so I had an absolute blast making the music for that and giving myself chills as I was doing it. That sounds big headed. I didn't mean it like that, but it's like I'm doing that to myself to make sure the music is good. I'm like, how far can I push this to make it feel spooky, to make what I know to be fake blood feel like real blood? It's such an interesting thing, but it is that show not tell, isn't it?
You have to have a sense check, and if it's not doing it for you, then it ain't going to be doing it for anyone else. And it's interesting when you're watching a TV program, whether it's subliminal or conscious, you know something bad's going to happen, or you know that they're going to be in love, which is why music is so important in production. And it's interesting actually because like you go to see a stage play, and unless it's a musical, then you won't necessarily have any underscore. So it is wholly reliant on the words on the page and the talent of the actors to convey that emotion that you're looking at, that you're exploring, that you're unpacking, what's being felt.
Yeah. So when you're, just out of interest, when you're writing the Christmas shows, for example, and you know there's going to be a piece of music there, how do you write around that?
I kind of just put a note in the script saying piece of music and some like notes of what it's got to convey. I mean, Jacob wrote The Bauble Bandit, and he would have given you a very clear brief of what he wanted Patricia's song to say. With something like Me and the Scallywags, which is a pirate-based story for Christmas show, we had lots of incidental music in that, which you written, and we had a song to cover a big scene change, which kind of set the tone with it being a sea shanty and what have you. But
Yeah.
then, so that was quite standard. That didn't actually move the story along. It just set the tone and the mood
Yeah.
for what was happening to the characters in the play and the transition from being on a desert island into a galleon ship. But then the big piece was the song at the end of the show, which was the Scallywags Christmas, and it was all basically about having a big fat party on board a ship
Yeah.
and everyone getting on really well and connecting and being jolly together. So in that respect, that again was just setting a tone and just kind of like highlighting the unity that this band of pirates had come to have. So in that respect, it didn't necessarily move the story along. It just kind of set the mood, and everyone left the theatre on buzzing on a high, getting ready and going out and getting ready for Christmas.
Oh, yes. Classic Christmas songs, sea shanties.
So as part of the introduction, we talked about you being a singer, songwriter, composer, and producer. I'm interested to hear about your approach to each of the like producing, songwriting, and performance. You know, do you still perform?
Occasionally. I'm intending to do more. I miss screaming into the void on stage.
Okay, and before we look at these different elements, tell me about performing. Because if you're performing your own music, obviously you're going to bring something to the table rather than someone else singing your song. So, what's that process like for you?
Well, back in the day when we first started the band, it was the live performance actually really dictated the songwriting. Pre-COVID, we were gigging very intensely, and so we kind of had a bit of a feel for our audience and how our audience responded to our songs. And I think consciously or unconsciously, it did it dictated the songwriting in that we knew there were moments in the set that felt like we wanted to get the audience involved more. So there'd be more hooky choruses, for example, or things that would be easy, or big whoa sections where we could get the audience singing. That was a really fun time in the band, I think. There was a lot of connection with the audience, and that is something that I really miss. And it's something at that time that is what gave me like purpose. It made me feel alive being on stage and singing with other people and having people literally scream the words I'd written back in my face. That was such an incredible feeling. And I do miss that. I think things changed quite drastically over COVID because we couldn't perform for about a year and a half,
Mm-hmm.
which it just completely transformed us, because I didn't stop writing for that whole time, but I didn't really have anyone else to bounce off musically or from an audience point of view. And I wrote a whole EP over that time, the Terra Incognita EP, which is probably one of the. It kind of marked a transition in our sound into something a little bit more wordy and intricate, I guess. So when we finally got to playing them live, like when we used to record songs prior to COVID, we would have been gigging them for like at least a year before we'd come to the recording. So we'd know exactly how it all went. It was really weird after COVID bringing this EP out that had already been recorded, had already been released to audiences that had either heard it online or had not heard it at all. That was a completely different experience. And it was great. It felt so good to be singing them. And there's moments in that where I got to belt, and there's moments where I got to like headbang and thrash around and stuff. It was really fun, but it was completely different. And that, I think, from that moment on, the songwriting and the approach to the band completely changed as well. And at that point, after that, sorry, I started doing all of the production myself.
And I guess this was the groundwork for the start of your journey into producing other artists, because obviously when you're in a studio with someone recording their own songs, they might not have tested it out live, and there's a move I see of more people going straight to recording rather than performing.
Yeah.
So those skills that you taught yourself through producing Terra Incognita put you in good stead for working with other clients, with collaborations.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I hadn't even considered being a music producer before that process. Like the whole reason I went into music production was, again, it comes back to this thing I was talking about right at the very beginning. Like the whole reason I started songwriting was because I struggled to communicate with people and communicate how I felt. The whole reason I ended up doing production was because I struggled to communicate what was going on in my head to the producers we worked with. And we worked with some really amazing producers that did understand us and did get our sound. But I also had previously some harder experiences where I just couldn't say what I was thinking, or I didn't know how to say the specific sound I wanted. So learning to do that myself originally was just to be like, this is the direction I'm going, can you just make that better? But the more I kind of fell into that, the more I fell in love with that side of things.
So looking at all these different skill sets that you have, how do they compare for you? What do you have something that you prefer doing? Do you have a different approach to each of them? Are there bits that you prefer to do more than others?
To be honest, I think I'm still trying to figure this out now. It's very helpful to have these varied skill sets, because it does mean that I can do everything if I need to. I really love writing with other people and producing other people's songs, especially because the people I'm working with at the moment, a lot of them are quite early on in their career, and it's the first time for a lot of these people that they've heard their songs sound like they do in their head out loud. I remember feeling that myself as an artist, like the first time I heard my songs out loud rather than just in my head was like an amazing feeling. So now watching other people have that experience, and because it's something I've been able to do for them, I love that. And it's really fun as well, getting to just jump around from like drums to guitar to bass, or be like, oh, have you tried this harmony? Have you tried this lyric? I really enjoy doing that. So I think probably music production for artists is probably the direction I want to go down more. I don't think I could ever stop songwriting for myself.
You've said that you found it quite difficult sometimes to be able to articulate what sound you wanted with other producers. Do you see that in the people who are coming to you as their producer?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There's a few people that I have as regulars that are producing like vast bodies of work over a long period of time. So there's one person that I've been working with for a year who definitely didn't have any of the vocabulary when we first started, but through working together, I've kind of made a bit of an effort to give him the vocabulary. And it's interesting now that when we're working on songs from scratch, he'll come in and be like, I actually think I'd like a bit of distortion right here, or I'd like this bit to have this specific EQ. And I'm turning around like, excuse me? Since when did you know what distortion was? That's like a silly example, but it's really nice to kind of build that relationship with people.
And I guess the more you work with someone, then shorthand comes in.
Yeah, 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 exactly. There's a few people that I can kind of preempt what they're going to say or what they're trying to say because we've worked together so long now. And that's really fun. I really like that. It is like a little bubble in the studio.
And I also guess that through the experience that you've had now, that you are able to give them the prompts that they need to be able to articulate what it is that they want.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I do really love that. But yeah, it's completely different working in so many different areas. It's completely different how you approach things with other people. And like co-writing for an artist, there's some artists I work with where we will co-write and produce as we go, and then the song will come out like, I don't know, like 6 weeks later after we've literally sat there and written it and produced it all in one go. So that's a really interesting experience, and it's quite an honor to have influenced someone's artistic output on such a level. But there's also co-writing with other people where we have a brief and we're like, oh, we might pitch this to a K-pop artist, for example. We're all kind of trying to step into someone else's headspace then. So it's just really bizarre. I can't think of another job where you'd get to do that.
I guess from a script writing perspective, the role that you're doing would be equivalent to a script editor. I write the words and I get to a point where I need an objective eye to look at it.
Yeah.
And, always when you send a script out and you get notes, some people dread them, some people embrace them. I think I'm the kind of person that embraces them because I want to make it the best that it can be. So if I take their note, I then filter it through my interpretation and then rewrite, and then it ultimately is a better piece of writing.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. I enjoy that. I do enjoy that part of it. I find it really interesting where it's like, to me, something is really obvious sometimes when I listen to something else. I'm like, oh, you should just change this line here or this word here and it'll make it so much easier to sing, or it'll make it catchier. And then like when I share that, it is really, you have to be really delicate about things. And also you have to respect if they say, no, I'm keeping it my way. That's totally fine. It's your creative thing. You do you.
I was going to say the caveat is that it is always someone else's opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean? And then if you took the same piece of work to another person, they might give you a completely different note, which is why as an artist or as a writer, it's really important that you keep your authenticity, your true voice in what you produce and how you interpret that note, so that it is still your voice that's coming through.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, you talked a lot about producing there, but in terms of your own songwriting and also the performance, how do all these things compare with each other? How do they balance? Is there something that you prefer to do more than this?
I don't know. I am still trying to figure that out because I love doing everything for different reasons. And as I mentioned earlier, now that I have the vocabulary of understanding what neurodivergent is, I understand that I need a lot of variety to keep life interesting. If I was just doing one of these things, I don't think I would be very happy. So I don't think any one of them is better than the other or is more important to me than the other, but balancing them all separately is quite difficult and I'm very tired. I'm trying to have 3 separate careers here, but all of them are equally exciting to me, so I don't really know where to stop.
It is a bit like a Venn diagram, though, isn't it? Because there is a lot of overlap.
Yeah, definitely, and they all inform each other, and each of those things gives me a different perspective on the other that I wouldn't have otherwise. But at the end of the day, I think if I was to be sensible, the sensible thing to do would be to pick a lane and go full ham. But I don't know. Maybe I'll slip into that by the time I reach full adulthood, which I technically already am, but I'm just pretending I'm not.
Well, you know that we all have our different needs in life, and for me, certainly, variety is very important to me, and that I'm guessing is the same for you. So, keep up all these different strands that you love working on, and then maybe eventually one will stand out more prominently than the others that you choose to go down.
Yeah. But also, I think in this day and age, as a creative person, as you well know, you kind of have to do a bit of everything to be able to stand out. I mean, you are a scriptwriter, and now you have a podcast. You have so many strings to your bow. But I feel like that's kind of necessary in this day and age. It's not. Well, to be fair, it's all I've really known. But I feel like diversifying your portfolio is kind of integral. Every artist that I know is doing too many different things.
So that kind of like brings me to my next question. Really, is about how do you make a living out of what you do? Because, like you say, lots of strings to your bow, lots of different projects, different kind of areas of work that you're involved in. And I know with the arts that so much of it is about your passion rather than the financial reward.
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you make a living?
That's a big question. And if you find out, let me know. But no, joking. I think for me, making a living, the area that I make most of my living in is production for other people, and also engineering. I engineer at a studio in Manchester as well. What I would like to see ideally happen is for the songwriting and royalties for songwriting to take off. That would be like the dream scenario, is that I write a number one and I can retire off that. Not that I ever would retire. I will be doing this till the day I die, just because I love it so much. I can't not. But right now, it is the songwriting and it is the production and clients. But it all kind of accumulates. Like each one of these areas does make bits of money. So
That feeds into what you were saying just now about as a creative person, you need to have lots of fingers in lots of pies.
yeah, exactly. So royalties from songs that have had sync placements, for example. If I were to have 100 songs at any given time synced, then I'd probably be quite comfortable. But I'm not at that stage in my career yet.
And
So
just as an explainer, when we say synced, that means that they're featured in TV productions or films or what
yeah,
have you. Yeah.
TVs, films, games, or like writing for adverts, for example. Like there are lots of different ways to make a living, but I think it's hard to make a living off of just one thing, as we've said.
Yeah.
So at the moment, it is just a little bit of everything, and it all kind of adds up in little ways. Yeah, it's quite complicated. It's very hard being a freelancer.
As is life in general.
Yeah, you got to keep tabs on a lot of things. I think I've got so many different spreadsheets. That's not talked about enough. There's the whole creative side of things, but admin is very difficult as a creative person.
And don't get me started on your tax return.
Oh man. Oh man.
So, future plans. What's in the pipeline for you?
What's in the pipeline? I am working on a new artist project, which I'm excited about, but I flip from being really excited to being absolutely terrified by, and I kind of just need to bite the bullet and start releasing things.
When you say new artist project, that means your own work for yourself.
Yes, yes, it means I think it's really important for me as a creative person to be able to have an outlet that is not refined or censored. Like, obviously, I still want it to be good quality music, but I need to just write without limits. So that's something I'm working on. I'm just getting the ball rolling with that at the moment. All the songs are there, but the outward facing stuff is not quite there yet. Music production. Just working with lots of different artists right now, which is awesome. And I'd love to see that develop into a bigger studio one day. And same with songwriting. just doing a lot of everything, and I'm excited to see all of the tracks that we're working on at the moment actually come out into the world. Yeah, it's an exciting time, I think.
There's a consensus of opinion that it's never been easier for people to get their work out there. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would agree. It's never been easier to get your work out there into the void.
I sense there's a but coming.
But I would say with that comes oversaturation, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it's great that anyone is able to do that. Like, I include myself in that. If I was born in the 60s, for example, would I be able to produce my own music on a laptop and just release it? No. Would I be able to self-teach myself as a producer for other artists? No, not a chance. Like, it's an incredible time to be alive as an artist because you can, in theory, there are no limits. But with that comes everybody doing it, and therefore nobody standing out. Anybody can put a song on Spotify if they wanted. So there's pros and cons. I think it's very hard to be an artist.
But on the back of having the opportunities of getting your stuff out there, one thing that comes across quite clearly is that it's about creating your own opportunities. It's about being motivated and getting out there and doing it. And then I guess once you've done that, it's about having tenacity. It's about sticking with it.
Yes, exactly.
Well, we're kind of coming to a close, really. It's been an amazing chat with you. But
thanks for having me.
You, as I said at the top of this podcast, you've got a really extensive catalogue of work that kind of covers many different genres. Is there one port of call for people to hear your work? Or what was the best place to hear your work? How can they best keep up with what you're up to?
Ooh, okay. In terms of hearing everything that I do, I have links on my website to my various playlists. So I have a playlist for all the music I've produced. I've got a playlist for all the music that I've written, even if I haven't had a hand in the production. So I guess there's that. You can listen to my artistic back catalogue from my band, which was called Trunk, and before that we were called the Elephant Trees. And I guess keeping up to date with everything that I'm doing now, Instagram is the first place. I'm aware that I need to get a TikTok. That's something I need to do and step into the 21st century, but we're getting there.
Well, obviously what we'll do is pop all the links in the information relating to this podcast, so people can hopefully just click through and find that. But you make the point there, so much of this is about self-promotion, and the way that people do that these days is through social media. It's you're kind of forced into that, whether it's something that you feel comfortable doing or not. But that is the way to get yourself known and to communicate with the people who like your work.
Yeah, exactly.
Martha, thank you.
Lee, thank you.
It's been a real privilege to be able to talk to you today and hear about your journey, about the things that have inspired you, the things that you are creatively working on at the moment, and a few hints and tips there for people who might want to follow that pathway as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. I'm a real big fan of the show, so it's an honour. It's an honour to be a guest.
And I know that I'm working on the next Christmas show with Coswallop, so I'm certain there'll be a brief coming your way very, very soon.
Well, it better come quickly. It's less than 100 days till Christmas.
Don't say that.
It's like 80 days till Christmas, people. Yeesh.
At the time of recording.
At the time of recording, yeah, sure. Cool.
Well, thank you so much for joining me here today, and hopefully we'll have you on again at some time in the future where we could talk about maybe a specific project that you're working on.
That'd be cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of All in the Words. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate and share, and join the conversation over on the All in the Words Instagram profile. You can find any links and episode extras on the podcast website, allinthewords.podbean.com. Until next time, keep writing, because it's not just craft, it's all in the words.